Hi, I'm Lizzie,
I'm Brenda.
and welcome back to Small Step Society. Episode 3, Cultivating Healthy Friendships, Part 2, Strengthening Communication.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hey guys!
Back with another episode.
Yay!
Let's just get into the song of the moment, our weekly segment. What is your song of the moment? What have you been listening to right this moment?
Yeah, the last song that I listened to is called I Say No from the West End version of the Heathers musical soundtrack.
Beautiful.
That's funny because Beautiful is the title, like the first track.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I totally know the soundtrack. That's why I made that.
How about you?
I was listening to All By Myself by Celine Dion. I think is how you pronounce her name.
Were you listening to it all by yourself?
I was.
You're crazy.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta put on those older tunes. Not that they're old, but older.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brings you back.
It really does to my childhood. I don't know. You know what? We're not doing a good job of communicating, are we?
No, I don't think so.
I think we need to learn about it.
Should we learn about it now?
I think we should.
Oh my gosh.
It's a good thing the camera's on and it's recording our voices.
Yeah.
Well, why should we talk about effective communication?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. For our new listeners, our mini-series is called Cultivating Healthy Friendships. And I think not only friendships, but just all relationships are based off of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And effective communication strengthens the bond between all the involved parties, and it helps to mend friendships and clear any misunderstanding there might be.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's like the more positive outlook on why communication is important.
Mm-hmm.
It can also help show a friend or whatever it may be. It can show them that you care. You know, you always want to have positive feedback in a relationship, friendship, anything, any social interaction. It's always good.
Yeah, communication is really important. I learned recently that there are 6 C's of communication. So I'm going to quickly list them off and then we'll go through them together.
Sounds good.
So we have clear, concise, concrete, courteous, consideration, and complete, which completes my little list.
So let's talk about the first one, clear. What
Yeah.
does that mean?
Clear is the more self-explanatory one, I think. By having clear communication, you convey your message in a very easy to understand way and aim to share your thoughts with the utmost clarity, which is a little redundant, but I think it gets the point across.
Yeah.
And this also includes clearly expressing when you're feeling overwhelmed, ignored, and unheard.
Yeah. And I think that goes right into the whole point about concision, the next C, is to also make your message as short and simple as possible. So redundancies probably aren't very helpful for concision, just because sometimes you don't want to get into like the whole thing of circular reasoning, you know?
Yeah.
Where you're like, this causes this, that causes the cause, but that doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah. So when people say short and sweet, that's what we mean by concision.
Yeah. And to add on to that, you want to remove filler words if you can. I mean, I know like using like and basically
and
it's all we all do it. But not only that, also avoid using like lofty language. Like don't try to use like, I know a thing that is hard to do, especially when you're confronting someone or you're pre-planning what you're going to say, is that you like think about your vocabulary and you're like, oh, I need to use this synonym. But sometimes it's just better to just use language that it's just easy to understand, makes sense.
And just like casual language that you would use on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then the concision one kind of leads us right into the concrete, which is our third C, which is using concise and focused language to drive a point home without any confusion. And I think one of the biggest examples that Brenda and I personally kind of figured out ourselves is the word just. we were talking about something and we came to the realization that we don't actually like the word just.
No, just like, let's give examples of how just can be used.
Mm-hmm.
So I can say, hey, I just wanted to remind you that I need you to get that done by Friday. When you use just like that, I feel like it diminishes everything that you said in the conversation, because I know that we usually use just like in a sentence like that, like in the workplace or something,
Mm-hmm.
to show that we're giving you like a gentle reminder.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, especially if you already communicated to them that you need whatever to be done by that certain deadline over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
you're just diminishing your point, because you're just saying, I just need you to do this. They're like, well, she's like, I'm just reminding you. They don't really need it like urgently, when in fact you do.
And I think kind of bouncing off of that, I feel like just is used in a passive aggressive sense as well. So when you've reminded someone multiple times and you go, hey, I just need you to do this,
Yeah.
it could be like there's a lot of meaning behind that just, but I don't actually want to really tell you. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna like passive aggressively put this in there so you get the hint.
Yeah. Or like, I was just trying to help. That's also
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, it's very passive aggressive. And also, I feel like when you use just, sometimes it can just scream like desperation
Mm-hmm.
or neediness, in a bad way, to be exact. Yeah. And yeah. The next C, courteousness. So friendliness and honesty go a long way. Like we talked about, using the word just.
Mm-hmm.
When you're using the word just, you're trying to be you're trying to be courteous, you
Mhm.
know. But of course, there's better ways of going about that. But essentially, when you're being courteous, you just need to remember to be respectful, especially when you're communicating feedback that can be taken more negatively. And I think we did a better, I was going to say good job. I don't want to like toot our own horn. But I think we did a better job of talking about that in communicating boundaries, and how you should be tactful,
Mm-hmm.
so that you avoid offending someone or attacking someone when you're just you're simply trying to communicate
Yeah.
your point.
Mm-hmm. That point ties in really well to our next C, which is consideration. So consideration is keeping the other person in mind, thinking about what's the best method to communicate with them. Do we have an established communicated method? What words should I use to tell them? Which we covered in our first 2 episodes with cognitive empathy and also just the established method of communication.
Yeah. I feel like courteousness and consideration go hand in hand, because you need to consider what words or like what topics to stay away from, and that's just like, you know, being friendly, like being a nice person, be
Mhm.
respectful. Don't bring something up that's not relevant to the conversation just to like attack someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, that brings us to our last C, the lovely complete.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you provide them with all the necessary information so that they truly understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about what you're going to say before you talk to them, so that
Mhm.
you actually get everything out that you want to get out, and they understand what you're saying. Which brings me to my next point, moving out of the C's.
Mm-hmm.
You should write down your feelings before approaching a conversation. That way, not only do you not lose sight of your goal and like get wrapped up into like a completely different train of thought, you also don't want to overwhelm the other person by just like vomiting out everything you have ever want to say in your life to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I already talked about this in the last episode. These are all very closely related episodes, in case you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a mini-series. But I explained like how you don't want to like just keep talking to fill silences, and then like you say like a bunch of like 5 different points, and then you're really getting nowhere because they feel attacked. You're not being concise, and you kind of just screwed the whole thing up.
Yeah, but I really like that concept of writing things down, because you can hit all the C's and you can make sure that you are effectively communicating with them.
I mean, I think that's why people sometimes prefer to like write things down, or like write an email, or rather than confronting in person.
Yeah.
Not only because like confronting in person means you actually have to see the other person, which can, you know, it can be hard, but also that way you like really get your thoughts in order,
Mm-hmm.
so that, you know, you don't waste their time too. You know, that would also be bad.
Yeah. It's just like writing an essay. You want an outline.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't script it, but you put the words out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Kind of how we talked about in the boundaries episode. you need to like practice some kind of introspection, or like just really getting your thoughts in order before you go and communicate them to whoever you need to do that with. So that involves prioritizing self-care. We'll also dive into this in further episodes. So that's a little sneak peek. But basically that means like you need to put your peace of mind over others. I think we both have struggled with this in communication, or like having that kind of boundary talk with someone. Is sometimes people they're just not going to understand where you're coming from. Like no matter how hard you try to explain something, sometimes it's just like it's a difference in values or different beliefs, or just
And just like your upbringing could be different too.
yeah, like there's so many things that factor into how someone perceives what you're saying and actually takes that into account. So at the end of the day, if you've tried your best or tried to the fullest of your capacity and how much ever your mind can take of like spending time on the topic. I don't know if that made sense, but if you've had enough of it, just you need to just take a step back and be like, okay, I'm going to prioritize myself over this friendship because clearly it's not working out, and I need to move on.
Yeah, with that comes reminding people about your boundaries and also sticking with your boundaries as well, because like we talked about last episode, by setting boundaries, you are doing self-care. So
yeah. And when you're doing this, it doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want, obviously. There's some kind of middle ground. So it is still up to you to like evaluate the situation and make sure you're still treating the other person fairly. But at the end of the day, don't just like throw away everything that's going on in your mind and like stressing yourself out if it's not helping the situation at all.
Yeah, that's why communication is so hard, because you still want to put yourself out there and put your thoughts out there, but you don't want to be mean about it.
Yeah.
And it's a hard balance. It's a fine line.
It's also so hard to come with, oh my God, it's so hard to come to terms with the fact that like someone just doesn't know what you're saying. Because then it feels like it's almost a you problem. You're like, why don't they understand? Like, am I wrong? Am I not effectively communicating? And I don't tell you about that. It's hard.
So I think respecting yourself also means learning to be assertive and standing up for yourself as well.
Yeah.
So this could be not being afraid to say no, which saying no is so hard at times.
Oh, it's so difficult.
Yeah. And
especially when you're caught off guard. Oh my gosh. It can be, especially if you're a people pleaser.
Yes.
Which, self-identified people pleaser.
Yeah, but I think saying no is very important in any relationship.
Yeah. If you feel a certain way, you just say it, because it's going to come to that eventually, and then it's worse, I feel like, to do it later. Obviously, it's acceptable. Don't just like not say no later because you feel like it's not going to go anywhere. It reflects badly on you. Always say no. If you feel that way, do it sooner rather than later. With that, I think another reason why people don't say no, like when they first feel it, is because we are afraid to lose somebody. But it's funny how the human mind works. I'm going to get all psychology on you. But like when I feel like when you're like ruminating on something, you have like all the negative feelings outweigh the bad one, negative feelings outweigh the good ones, the positive feelings. But then suddenly when you're like thinking about, oh my gosh, I could lose this person, then it's like, oh, all the good memories come back and you forget all the bad ones. Which I think usually stems from some kind of fear of rejection or whatever. But that is not a good reason. I'm going to be honest. Your mind is selectively focusing on things, and at the end of the day, if you have felt that way, there is a reason why you have felt the way that you do, and you need to face it.
I think this fear of losing somebody is very real and very relatable. So far, we've covered more of the confrontational communication styles, but that's not the only kind of communication there is. There's more positive ones.
Like what?
Like the ones you use in friendships, the positive feedback like you mentioned earlier this episode.
Okay, yeah, so I think it's kind of like a growth-minded approach, if you will. So one way you can do that is just really listening to the other person. She just did it. You see, that's positive
Yeah.
feedback. Like making or well, maybe not that
Like
noise.
responding.
Yeah, like responsive noises.
Mhm.
Now we're so aware.
Ah!
But no, if see, like that helps me realize that okay, you do. No, that gives me the assurance that you're really listening to me and you're not like zoned out, and
Mhm.
also that you understand. Yeah. So why do we care if the other person knows that we're listening to them?
Because I think the more you show that you listen, or the more that you actually really listen, the more they'll open up. And then the more you really listen, the more they'll open up. And it's a positive cycle, on and on. And
It
then
really is.
you have a closer bond and you get closer in your friendship.
Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
basically all there is. So that's friendship.
Yeah,
Okay, episode's done.
but within a friendship, I think it's a mutual understanding that almost everyone has, that you don't want friends, or you don't need friends who are gonna beat you up
Yeah, I
and
mean,
shut you down.
we build friendships so that we can like laugh together and
And
cry together in a good way.
have fun.
Yeah,
And even if it's not crying together in a bad way, like to support them even.
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you don't agree with even if I didn't agree with your way of solving a problem,
Mm-hmm.
I should still support you. Obviously, I can give you my feedback, be like, maybe you should think about this in another way. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but if like your mind is set on something and it's not like actually like hurting anyone, like
Right.
whatever you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
then my job as a friend and probably what I want to do is just to be there for you and support you and, you know, just let you know that I care about what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Along with that, just making sure that you're with them in the battle, that whatever battle that they're facing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if it's an internal battle.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything about it, but you can be there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And with that, of course, if someone comes to you with a problem, you don't want to just give them unwanted advice. I feel like I might have mentioned this on a previous episode. I don't remember. But this is what I always say. You should ask someone when they're like ranting to you or when they're telling you about a problem. You should ask them, do you want me to listen or do you want me to give you advice?
Mm-hmm.
Because some people just need someone to listen to them. And other people, they want someone to actually like help them out, like help them through whatever's going on. And I know I struggle with that because like my automatic reaction when someone tells me they have problems, like, I'm like, how can I fix it? What can I do for them? I need to be there for them. And sometimes being there for them just means saying, I heard you.
Mm-hmm.
They just need a sounding board.
Yeah. And this last point kind of ties back to the first point of being real, not like the little social media app that is quite popular right now, but being open and honest and being present. I learned somewhere that little kids are actually really good at this, being real, being open and honest, because they haven't grown up enough to learn all the social nuances, to hide their feelings and please the other person. So channel your inner child and be there, be present.
True.
Yeah.
But there's moderation there. Don't just like say whatever's on your mind. 'Cause
Right.
that could go really badly.
Right.
Just remember, it's not about you. And this brings me to a nice philosophical tangent. I came across this quote from the 19th century German philosopher Nietzsche. And so he writes in this text, I believe, called Human All Too Human. Maybe it's a book. Whatever. He writes, and I quote, "A good writer possesses not only his own spirit, but also the spirit of his friends." A note on Nietzsche. So most of his notable contributions to philosophy are set on this concept of life affirmation. More specifically, he questioned any doctrine or any belief that drained life energies because he believed that you should reject them even if they are socially relevant. So I think like a really quick basic example of this in today's world would be social media. So I'm sure you feel this too. Like a lot of people feel pressured to be on social media because it's like how you stay connected and with people. You know, it's basically all consuming. But if you feel like social media doesn't bring you any joy, then according to Nietzsche's philosophy, you should just let it go and you should do what makes you happy because it's not hurting anybody else. So I bring his whole doctrine and his whole belief system up because no matter what your views are on Nietzsche or whether you agree with his philosophy, this quote is especially relevant to a conversation because being that it came from Nietzsche, that means it didn't come from a place of being socially appropriate, but rather from a place of doing the healthy thing, doing what positively affects your own self. And of course, there happens to be mutual benefit from this interpretation of his words that I'm about to give you. So just to reiterate the quote in case you forgot, now that you have all this information, a good writer possesses not only his own spirit, but also the spirit of his friends. So the first part of the quote, a good writer possesses not only his own spirit, is talking about the more introspective part of communication, I think. Like thinking about what you want to say. What is your own spirit? What are your values? What do you really want to convey to the other person? And then the second part of the quote, also the spirit of his friends. So I need to get in your head. No, I need to take on your point of view. So it's more of like an outward thinking. So thinking about what's going on in your head or like the other person's head, and ensuring or trying your best to ensure that what you're going to say is not going to elicit a non-negative. No, what you say is going to elicit a non-negative reaction in them. And I say non-negative because as long as you're not hurting the other person, as long as you're not causing a negative reaction, just putting that information out there and putting what you believe or what you're wanting to convey out there is just always going to be beneficial.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. So like a more low level, summary of this quote is basically what I'm trying to say is communication is a two-way street. So there needs to be honesty going both ways. So I need to be, or the initiator of the communication needs to be honest about what they're feeling, and the person receiving the communication needs to be honest about how they're interpreting what is being said and how they're taking in whatever is being said. And of course, there needs to be a good mutual understanding of what is being communicated. Fun little relation to the podcast is, I think podcasting is a little more difficult. Even though we don't have like a live audience, which means like if we mess something up, we can say it again, or like if we feel like something's not clear, we can re-say it. Yes, it's edited. I know, crazy what? But it also means that we're not getting that positive feedback from whoever is on the other side of the camera or the screen. We don't know if we're being effective communicators, so we're trying our best. But
it's true.
That's why you should rate and review, because that really helps us.
It does. Give us feedback. We want to know what you think.
Yeah.
On the topic of communication is a two-way street, it brings us right to reciprocating. So if your friend lends you a listening ear in a situation that you need help with and you really appreciate it, show them your appreciation. And we understand feelings are hard to talk about. Maybe you're not much of like a feelings person and it feels mushy and gross. But you can give them a small gift, maybe do their chores if you guys have chores. Invite them out to dinner to show a little appreciation. And I'm sure they would be like, "Aw, thank you."
Yeah.
And then
it's that positive feedback loop again.
If you're struggling on thinking of ways to show them your appreciation, think of the love languages. We have physical touch. You can give them a hug. You can give them a high five, whatever floats your boat. We have words of affirmation, saying thank you. That really helped. Gift giving them a gift card of their favorite restaurant. I don't know. Quality time, taking them out to dinner. We have acts of service, like doing their chores or whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The love languages are more than just romantic relationships.
Yes. Love languages are for all relationships. So as we wrap up this episode on communication, there's a couple things that
we should talk about again, just so we really understand how to establish good communication skills.
So first we have the power of active listening, being present, being there for someone when they're talking, and showing them in your body mannerisms, nodding, things like that.
Or even like restating what they've said back to them so that you make sure that you've understood what they're saying.
Exactly. Making sure you guys are on the same page. It's perfect. The Berkeley Wellbeing Institute had a quote that I really liked. So they said, in contrast to passively listening, the active listener has a clear goal in mind to capture and reflect both the emotional experience and the ideological perspective of the speaker.
As part of active listening, but also I feel like in just general to communication is you should be careful to withhold judgment. So don't like interrupt someone if they're telling you how they feel and like just immediately just shut them down. You need to keep an open mind to accept new ideas and keep your thoughts and ideas on the back burner. And then once they're finished talking, try to see how you can reconcile those two different viewpoints in your mind and maybe like come to a compromise in your own mind, or at least consider what's being said.
Yeah, exactly. I think you bring up a good point that you should try to remember conversations that you had with the person before. Yeah, specificity is good because you go from surface level conversations to something more deeper, the ones that you can connect more with because you remembered something about them.
Yeah, which I think like goes back to the whole point of why effective communication is so helpful, because you connect with them. That's the end goal of everything.
Yeah, and that's why we communicate, to have friends.
Yeah, and basically that is how you cultivate healthy friendship, I guess. Yeah.
Again, we're not experts on any of this, but
We're trying our best.
yes, we learn so much all the time.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, we already went into that last episode, but
Yeah.
yeah, I yeah.
And this is just us kind of sharing what we learned over the week.
Yeah, and if anyone has any feedback, any tips they'd like to add, anything they maybe don't agree with, feel free to leave it in the comments.
Yeah, anything we missed, we would love to learn more about it too.
Oh, for sure.
So,
or any quotes that inspire you too.
yeah,
In communication. Just really anything.
Just let us know. And you can find us on
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can also find the video version of us if you're not already watching on YouTube. Just anywhere you can find podcasts except where you can't.
Yep. And that was Cultivating Healthy Friendships.
Yeah. See you next Sunday.
Bye.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.